This is the final second half of the building or the design of the cutting board for the sink cutout. And we have the three components already built in the first half video, but without the joinery. So in this video I'll show the completion of the joinery. And first, on the center section of the cutting board is a tongue, a 1/4 inch by 1/4 inch tongue. So I've placed some guidelines and then draw it out a 1/4 inch length on that tongue. In addition to the tongue, there are 3 tenons, longer tenons, that come out into the breadboard. And I'll put in some guidelines to position those tenons. The center tenon, all of these tenons are 3/4 inch long, and the end tenons are going to be 1 3/8 wide, and the middle tenon will be 2 inches wide. So these guidelines will position the edges of these tenons. Okay, so now I can draw the side edges of the tenons. These are 1/4 inch thick. They'll protrude into sockets in the breadboard. Bring it out 3/4 inch. And there will be screws that also fasten the breadboards into these tenons. Okay, so the tenons are on one end, and I need to place those same tongues and tenons on the other end of the center section of the breadboard, of the cutting board. I'll just copy the joinery and bring it down the green axis, and then flip along green and bring it back into its proper position. Not there, that's on the breadboard. Bring it back into, there we go, into the center section. Now that we have the tenons, we can, and the tongue, we can make the joinery in the breadboard, the sockets and the groove. First, the 1/4 inch groove. I'm just using X-ray to see the joinery that we've already done, and use that joinery to create the sockets, the groove and the sockets in the breadboard. So there's the groove, the 1/4 inch by 1/4 inch groove, and I'll draw in the boundaries of the sockets now using the tenons as guides, and push-pull the socket into the breadboard. Okay, let me unhide the other breadboard. So the joinery is complete, but the screws that connect the breadboard to the center section need to be done, but I'm going to do a review here of make sure that that looks good on the breadboard, all the sockets and the groove. So I'm happy with that construction. Let me check the center section to see if that's also okay. Looks good so far at this end with its tongue. Oh, well, here's a missing face. That happens when you copy the joinery to the other end. Just complete that face, knock out that edge. And then, yeah, I've got some missing edges here on this more complicated end because it's got the rabbit in it. And I don't need these edges here, here, and here. So that looks clean now. So the remaining work here is to open up some grooves, some holes for the wood screws that are going to connect the breadboard to the center section. The idea here is to make sure to not glue up the breadboard solid to the center section, because that won't allow the cross grain to move. So we'll use screws in channels that allow some movement of the wood. And I'm bringing some little sockets, some little cutters that will be the locations for the screws. Instead of just shank holes for the screws, there'll be slots. Just not 3/8 is fine, 3/8 length. And so I'll create these cutouts first with these little cutters. Now I'm exploding the cutter now. And I'll do an intersection with the rest of the breadboard. I need to select all and then do intersect faces. Let me do that again. I'm going to explode the whole component. I've got everything selected. Intersect faces with selection. And then I can clean up the cutters that expose the little sockets for the screws. There'll be plugs that'll cover the screws after they're inserted. And these little 3/8 by 3/8 openings give a little bit of movement allowed by the wood changing with humidity and environment. Actually, I'm going to glue only in the middle tenon, in the middle area. I won't need a slot here. I'll just need a, in the middle screw. I'll have that screw going through a hole only, not a slot. So now I've got the locations for the screws. I'm reversing some faces here. Okay, so we need the slots for the actual screw. I think I'm using number 8 screws here, which has a 3/16 inch diameter in the threaded section. So the shank hole needs to be 3/16 by 3/8. All right, let's bringing a copy over here just to check it again. Looks okay. And I'm ready to make the slots for the screws, and those will be 3/16 by 3/8. I need some guidelines in here. Maybe 3/32 that direction. I'll create a 3/16 by 3/8 slot. So that'll allow a little bit of movement of the wood. And no gluing at this end. That's the boundary of the slot. And I've gone to X-ray so we can see the slot go right through to the tenon. Same thing over here. 3/8 wide by 3/16 tall socket for the screw. In the center, I just need a shank hole, so it'll be a 3/16 diameter hole. Where's the center? Here's the center. And push-pull that back to the center tenon. One thing that I've forgotten to do is to give a little bit of slop in the tenon area so that there's some movement possible there. Reposition that breadboard. And then these screws will be plugged, and I've got a component plug here. I'll just put one of them in. And that finishes the joinery and the construction of the cutting board.